Welcome, everyone. We'll be starting shortly. Vanessa, can you confirm if our host is here? Lindsay, did you want to take it away?
Great, sure. Are we ready to go? Yes? Okay, great, thank you so much. Sorry guys, a little bit of technical difficulties connecting. So welcome, good afternoon, and welcome to the BC Museums Association virtual conference. My name is Lindsay Foreman, and I'll be your host for today's lightning talks. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that as an organization of provincial scope, the BCMA recognizes that its members, today's presenters, and attendees occupy the lands and territories of BC's Indigenous peoples. We ask all of you to reflect on the places where you reside and work, and to respect the diversity of cultures and experiences that form its richness. Today, I'm joining you from my home office, which is situated on the traditional unceded territory of the Kwantlen and Katzie First Nations. So as I mentioned, my name is Lindsay Foreman, and I'll be hosting this session today. I am the managing editor for BCMA's Roundup magazine, and I'm also the resource development coordinator at Place des Arts in Coquitlam. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you so much for joining us today. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We will be recording this session and make it available afterwards for everyone. The session is also being live streamed through our BCMA Facebook account. So please ensure to use the chat feature, which is located on the bottom of your screen, to make support, if you have tech support questions or any comments you would like to make. So if you just need to move your mouse toward the bottom of your screen, and you'll see that bar show up for you. In an effort to improve our accessibility of this session, we have a live transcription available. So if you click on the live on otter.ai live notes view stream in the top left corner of your window, a separate website will open up in your browser to allow you to use this new service. So sorry, there are technical difficulties, so I guess we're not using that. Sorry about that. So I guess without further ado, we will start off kicking off our lightning talks with our first set of speakers, Kim Gao and Chris O'Connor from the Royal BC Museum.
Thanks, everyone. As soon as our slides start, we'll start our presentation. As Lindsay said, I'm Kim Goff, and this is Chris O'Connor.
It's a tricky last name.
5 ways to say it. 5. I've heard all of them. And a few extra. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Lindsay. We want to acknowledge that the Royal BC Museum sits on the unsurrendered territory of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, the Lekwungen-speaking peoples. Both Chris and I are grateful to live here and to work here.
This has been a period of compounding challenges, not equally distributed. We are all trying to navigate through in a good way, and this lightning talk will address how our learning department here at the Royal BC Museum has tried to respond to at least the pandemic part so far.
As I mentioned, my name is Kim Goff, and despite loving museums as a kid, I never thought about working at a museum until I finished university and a friend invited me to volunteer. I've been privileged to be able to work in museums for the last 24 years, both in Alberta and here in British Columbia.
And my name's Chris O'Connor. Kim and I are both learning program developers here at the Royal BC Museum, committed to values of inquiry, co-creation, anti-racism, inclusion, and belonging. We lean into the people part of museums through a playful and critical look at the stuff of museums.
Prior to the pandemic, our colleague Liz Crocker had been working on developing digital field trips for schools who couldn't visit us in person. This meant she had equipment, checklists, and systems in place for gallery tours, curatorial Q&As, and interactive programs.
So while during normal, or quote unquote normal times, a large majority of our programming is on site within the museum walls, once the pandemic hit, our modest recent experience with digital learning at least gave us some footing to begin to find our way through.
Pivoting from on-site programs to 100% online programs was everyone's next challenge. How could we present interactive and educational content if people weren't allowed to come to the museum? No, really, how? What would we do? What would we do it with? And who would we do it for? These were all questions we needed to think about.
And we did think about it, and we brainstormed really like fast and furious. So for example, with only a few hours notice before we needed to all leave the museum, we quickly gathered up our colleagues across the institution and made videos of them in their favorite places within the museum to share on Instagram. And that was really good just in terms of like staff morale as things were like quickly shifting.
We got news then that staff couldn't be at the museum, so that meant our plans for being in the galleries for our online programs were now out of the question. So we reached out to our staff, including curators, collection managers, exhibit art staff, and asked them to sign up for 30-minute online chats about what they would be working on from home. And with many thanks to them all, they did.
And this made up our core pandemic online programming. RBCM at Home, which is geared primarily for adults, RBCM at Home Kids, which primarily for families, and RBCM at Outside, a field trip version, which appealed to people wanting to go outside but stuck in their homes.
And an intergenerational aspect between all of them. 1 week after being sent home, we piloted our first RBCM at Home program. The idea was to keep it simple. One presenter, no slides. The presenter and I did a short run through, and then we invited our volunteers to be our test audience because we knew if we made a boo-boo, at least they would be forgiving to us.
And they were forgiving, but there were glitches, lots of glitches along the way. Facebook Live failing a few times, as we saw just now, a live transcription sometimes fails, lighting and sound adjustments needed, shaky connectivity at times, a few rude comments from participants, not many, but a few, but all good learning. But so what did these programs look like? We're gonna explore a little bit of in terms of what the programs look like.
Talk about RBCM at Home. It's a type of noon-hour chat about the work museum staff are doing at home or how their work is reflected in their home. For example, our curator of art showed us her home art collection, and our curator of history gave us a tour of the books on his bookshelf and what he was interested in. The programs are live on Zoom and then live streamed to Facebook. We use webinars so that people watching live can ask questions without accidentally interrupting with their audio or video. We also record the programs and post them on our YouTube channel, whose slide you should be seeing now, but you're not. And the idea for the YouTube channel is that people can watch at their convenience, share an interesting program after the fact. And now that schools are back in, we're finding it's also been a really good resource because we can direct them to the YouTube channel and they can distribute and share videos from there as homework assignments or part of research sessions.
So RBCM at Home Kids has a similar structure, but with a kids and families twist. Most sessions have some kind of making project. What you're seeing on screen now is a kid at home making armored dinosaurs with Play-Doh and dry pasta with Victoria Arbor, our curator of paleontology. We have had a very active following of families from all over BC and beyond. I encourage kids to send in their artwork after each session, and I always respond and let the kids, and you'll see there some adults, let them know how much I've appreciated what they've created. So it continues to make that connection.
In June, we made an invitation to museums, cultural centers, and heritage sites around BC to take part. This invited new perspectives and experiences, and it also welcomed new audiences to take part in the presentations. And as a bonus, it's been allowing us to build our relationships with our colleagues all over the province.
It was also a way to respond to the moment. So the pandemic made it harder for people to go on perhaps their typical summer road trip. So we tried to bring the road trip to their living room. And through that process, we visited all of these organizations. And I just did a little like a Google search in terms of how long it would take, and it would take 56 hours to drive to all of these places. But we did it just through our BCM at Home programs.
Because it's 2020, we have more challenges ahead of us. Although our museum has reopened again, attendance isn't what it used to be. So how do we start monetizing online programs? Schools are back in, but are they going to be ready to book programs online this fall? There's a lot to think about. And also, how are we going to keep our balance with all of the new online programming and things that we're working on?
So we're continuing with our BCM at Home programs. I actually just came off of one just right before this. But we're building on that and trying to build off of the learning that we've done. Whatever kind of normal returns, what we've already done will continue with the hope to bring even more communities together, both within and beyond the museum walls. So thank you so much for listening to the first lightning talk of today.
Thanks, Kim and Chris. Hello to you all. My name is Michelle Willard, and I'm speaking to you today from the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. Next slide. My topic is small museums and activism. We can move to the next slide. A bit about me. I am inspired by the potential of museums as powerful platforms for positive social change. I operate a company called My Museum, primarily assisting in the development of small museums. Next slide. Small museums are hotspots for activism. Lorraine Bell, a museum professional and University of Victoria PhD candidate researching small museums as agents of social change, certainly thinks so. Here's why. Social engagement. Small museums have a long history of serving and collaborating with their communities. In the words of one small museum professional, we have community engagement larger museums can only dream of. Local knowledge. Small museums conserve local knowledge that can shed light on wider historical and contemporary events. This makes abstract stories more real and personal and can deepen understanding and empathy. Nimble practice. Because their exhibit and program spaces are smaller, staff and volunteers are skilled at distilling information and highlighting essential messages. Regional networks. With their high level of collegiality and spirit of cooperation with other organizations, small museums can build networks of activism around local and regional issues. All of this provides an ideal platform to get the message out and make a big impact. Next slide, please. What might activism look like? Small museums have engaged in various forms of activist work, both inside and outside the museum. Examples include protests, workers' memorials, historical reenactments, lobbying, grassroots community building, performance theater, and more. Often, with a staff of one or two, it is significant that small museums have found ways to create space to engage in activism, regardless of ongoing limited capacities. Perhaps it is through the strength and validation from the communities they serve that lights the fire of activism for small museums. Decolonizing the museum is activism at work, with the intent to expose, reconfigure, and protest deeply entrenched narratives step by step. I would like to acknowledge staff in small museums who have been engaging in this work or organizing to do so. It is a long journey. many setting out with minimal support or resources, and for some under the added challenges of mixed organizational approval. It is this last point that continues to perplex me. There remains a disconnect between museum staff practices and organizational mandates. Next slide, please. As a small museum, navigating the pandemic while sector-wide issues make headlines across the country, this is an opportunity to take steps which may provide the footing to begin new dialogues. Take a critical look at the messages on the museum's website or other marketing materials. Is there lingering written content from when the nonprofit society was incorporated years ago, including narratives such as these? The X-Museum celebrates European settlers and their contributions to the development of the area. The Y Museum was established to collect documents and records of historical and cultural value, which details the lives of early pioneers. Examine collections policies. One small museum developed an Indigenous belongings policy in collaboration with local First Nations to acknowledge that Indigenous communities have ownership over belongings within the museum's collections and are primary decision makers about the use and care of belongings. Plan an intervention within the exhibits or outside the museum entirely through the insertion of new dialogue. One small museum, together with their municipality, sought to raise awareness about the Japanese Canadian community, which was forcibly removed during World War II. Through extensive research, the museum located and connected with descendants of Japanese Canadians who had lived in the community, together developing interpretation to be located on the site of their former homes. Foster partnerships with diverse cultural communities as an opportunity to critique historical museological practices in juxtaposition with current directions. One small museum built a relationship with a contemporary Northwest Coast First Nations artist through a discussion surrounding a problematic European settler-focused timeline in the museum's gallery. They collaborated on responses, and an art installation was developed to disrupt the timeline's narrative. We'll move on to the next slide. Activism is a commitment to positive social change. What support might small museums need to undertake this work? How might we engage as a whole to join the journey? I look forward to, or how might we engage organizations as a whole to join this journey? And I look forward to the upcoming BCMA conference sessions, Beyond the Black Square, a meaningful conversation on museums and allyship, followed by the Decolonization Roundtable for future directions and solutions. On the last slide, I'd like to thank the BCMA for the opportunity to speak today, and I really enjoyed thinking about this topic and the challenge of fitting it into a 5-minute talk. And a copy of this talk can be found on the blog I keep at mightymuseum.ca, and my contact information is on this slide as well. Thank you so much.
Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Gwe, hello. Deluisi Alana, Nina Elnu. My name is Alana, and I'm an engagement facilitator here at Surrey Art Gallery. Next slide, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Cecily Nicholson. I'm the interpretive programmer at the Surrey Art Gallery. We are situated here on Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, Katesay territory, here at Bear Creek Park, where the salmon runs behind us. Next slide, please. So we'd like to present a brief review of our online remote programming and efforts to engage community through inquiry-based learning and art making in this recent time. Art Together, like many of our spaces, institutions, and organizations, the temporary closure of the exhibition and art making spaces has proven a challenge to adapt programming. For Art Together, a series of online programs available through our website and social media channels, we have considered art and artists in the community's engagement, seeking to spark imagination and celebrate the way that art can impact our lives. Next slide, please. So just a brief shout out to Chad Galloway, who's been a key person in terms of working on video editing with us, as well as Harlow Martin, whose animations you can see in some of the GIFs have been shared in the slides. So this particular slide, we're just celebrating a small little aspects of art in motion. So art together, we've organized in 3 components: art in motion, art in conversation, and art from the archives. So art in motion has been our work to develop online video lessons, working with artist educators to produce online engagements and processes that enable the creation of art at home, as well as outside, in the kitchen, in the backyard, at the park, and so on. So we have a few examples here from our YouTube series. Next slide, please. Art in conversation is an element of live discussion, events, talks, interviews with locally and nationally based artists. Here we involve virtual tours of art exhibitions and other behind the scenes features in the artworks which move us. We featured here, for example, the July 4th event that we held in partnership with the Indian Summer Festival, as well as an example from a tour video from assistant curator, Reese Edwards. Next slide, please. And lastly, art from the archive, which is stories, artworks, and ideas that have shaped the gallery, from essays about works in the permanent collection to teachers' guides and recordings of past events and performances, which we've placed in conversation with each other. So here, for example, we have a still from an interview with Robert Davidson from 2010, and a wonderful performance by Sammy Chan, which is part of our Sound Thinking Symposium, or our Media Symposium, rather, that was held last fall. Next slide, please.
Where All Artists Creative Practices at Home is a free phone-based partnership program with Seniors Come Share Society for their Seniors Center Without Walls initiative created during this time. Working with long-term artist instructors with their school programs, April Davis and Claire Cilliers, as well as myself, we deliver hour-long art classes over the phone to seniors throughout Surrey. It continues to be a learning journey as we cannot see what they're doing and they are unable to see us. The classes themselves are entirely verbal. The classes are built around feedback from the seniors themselves and work toward being adaptive to different experiences they may have, like low vision. Next slide, please. Art takeouts, drawing in the field with Alexandra Thompson and hand building with clay with Amelia Butcher are learn at your own pace courses delivered through 6 pre-recorded video lessons, materials for pickup here at the gallery, and a live online session delivered by the instructors. Part of the success of this course was due to our strong artist educators, Alex and Amelia, and our editor, Chad Galloway, who worked closely with us to create these videos. These pilot courses have generated some positive feedback from the community members, especially those experiencing isolation and who cannot easily leave their home for varying reasons. Next slide, please.
So just in general, to wrap up, we've had some, obviously lots of learning lessons along the way, some significant successes. For example, in social media, the gallery has reached over 25,000 views of our videos and work online in terms of art making sessions and so on from Art Together. We've an increase of over 20% in new Facebook followers and so on. It's been ideal from our perspective to form a distinct body of programming that's been viable remotely at this time, building obviously on earlier lessons, but growing something unique. Some really key learning efforts have gone into the efficiencies of working with videographers and editors and other artists who historically have been instructors in our space, but also helping them adapt to these formats. And overall to improve cost and labor in terms of thinking through how to do this better and better in terms of our method. A mainstay of the work overall, though, however, is not changed relative to the philosophy of our gallery, and that is that we are concerned about deepening relations and honing our method of collective production involving a community of people, artists, educators, editors, as well as interacting with public and audience. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And just a sample of some qualitative feedback from Art Takeout and We Are All Artists programs. One participant from Art Takeout: I absolutely love the take-home aspect since I have some physical and mental health issues, and I've had a really hard time finishing projects quickly. So the ability to work at my own pace and my own time really appeals to me. And we do have received a number of feedback about people dealing with isolation and the ways in which art and art making can build community and connection. And one of the consistent feedbacks that we hear from the seniors especially is that we need you and that we need you every day. So that concludes our talk. And Lana, unless you've got anything else to add.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Robin, and I'm the School and Public Programs Manager at the Maritime Museum of BC. We're a pretty small museum on the territory of the Lekwungen people, also known as the Esquimalt and the Songhees, which for a maritime museum is especially important because it means we get to do our work and our learning on the territory of people who've been stewards of our ocean environments for millennia. We have 5 full-time staff members and often summer students and interns using Young Canada Works funding. I was actually traveling in Costa Rica just a week before the pandemic was declared in March, and came back for a week of work as usual before we completely decided to not reopen on March 19th. As soon as the museum closed, our next conversation was how we keep things going in a pandemic world. How do we still engage with people who are in our community even though they can't come to us? Because we have a really small physical space, we actually have a pretty strong record of outreach already. Our programming staff often heads out to schools, community centers, retirement homes, homeless shelters, anything to deliver programming. And so we kind of took the pandemic as an opportunity to get a lot of the other things that had been on our list of to-dos, but we're pretty far down that list going. Next slide. So we're now at a point where, because of our pivot, we have an online gift shop where people can purchase items for pickup and delivery, some online exhibits that people can contribute to and comment on themselves, and a variety of online tour videos. Maritime cultures and industries were often first adopters, and we really like exploring and taking risks. So at the museum, we embraced that legacy, and we have a pretty small and flexible team. And so we were able to create MMBC Discovers, which is our virtual programming that includes 2 virtual speaker series, online field trips, Zoom trivia nights, and regular live tours. And on the next slide, I made a quick video clip to share with you of a few of the things we've been working on. So you can play that now.
Hi, my name is Emma, and I am the programming assistant at the Maritime Museum of BC. Today, beside me on this table are a few cool things from our natural history collection that I'd like to talk to you about.
We're going to be looking at this narwhal tusk, but it's not a tusk, it's a canine tooth.
I'm here in the Victoria Inner Harbor at the Parade of Ships. That is what we are bringing you today, is a how to use Effectant video. So thank you again for tuning in. This Thursday at 2 p.m. we're going to be going to the collections again, and we're going to be talking about some cool things that Jeff, our archivist, has brought out for us there. So we'll hopefully see you on Thursday at 2 p.m. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Okay, next slide, please. So part of what really worked well for us is that we operated from the beginning as though this would be a long-term change. We didn't think the situation would be completely over within a couple weeks or even months. So we started planning for the long haul, always thinking about what would still be relevant when we're able to open our doors again at some point. We also had the benefit, and I'm going to shout out to some really amazing temporary staff. Our intern, Sydney Furman, who advocated for the trivia nights that were really successful in the spring, and our summer student this year, Emma DeBloy, who came to the team already knowing filmmaking and the video editing skills that we needed quite badly. We were actually able to also reintroduce our Nautical Nights speaker series to a lot of enthusiasm this September, which was an event we had canceled last fall. Next slide, please. And so we're now at a point where we have a blend of online and in-person options. I do still offer outreach in-person programs, but mostly outdoors and with big gaps between programs. So I have led a couple sea glass jewelry workshops in parks at this point, wearing a mask, and I have a portable speaker that I bring with me. Staff and community safety is still the most important thing. So we have pretty extensive procedures for those kinds of programs. We're only open 1 day a week because we rely on volunteers to staff the front desk. And if they aren't available, then our regular staff needs to do that. What we're finding with our virtual programming is that we're actually showing people more of our collection than we've been able to in the past 5 years, since we moved from a 30,000 square foot location to a 2,000 square foot one. And we're reaching out to people further across the province and country than we've ever been able to with our talks. We haven't recreated any lost revenue streams really, but we know that isn't something that's going to happen overnight or during our pandemic. So we're just continuing to do the best we can with what we have. If you have any questions about the work that we're doing, obviously I can only gloss it over in this lightning talk, but please do send me along an email. You can get in touch with me at lrobin@mmbc.bc.ca, or my contact information is on the website, and I'll put it in the comments after I'm done my chat. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening today.
Museum of Surrey worked quickly after the museum's March 16th COVID-19 closure to provide visitors online access to the museum. The topic of this presentation, virtual exhibit content, was just one part of a much broader museum-wide effort. The first items offered virtually were drawn from existing on-site programs that were put online. These included free school programs, craft making videos, and even telephone-led reminisce kits for seniors. To drive people to the new online content, a robust social media campaign was launched by the museum's publicity team. The museum kept local but sought out global ideas and quickly learned from international initiatives like #MuseumBouquet. This social media initiative saw shuttered museums send each other beauty and love through virtual bouquets drawn from art and collections. Museum of Surrey joined in by featuring botanical works from the Surrey Heritage Collection, the Arctic Voices exhibit, and from the upcoming feature exhibit, Nature's Clothesline. Museum of Surrey was inspired by the Museum from Home hashtag. The idea is that museums could do something to help people stuck at home feel connected and entertained through short, fun videos made in museums. As curator of exhibits, I led the creation of 2 kinds of video content for the Museum from Home series. The first was a series of fun 1-minute videos featuring the museum's mascot, Raj the raccoon. Hey, it's Raj the raccoon. Hello, Raj. What's that? You want us to come inside the museum with you? You're going to show us one of your favorite things? Okay, let's go. This is one of Raj's favorite things. It's a mural of the Nickel River. The second type of outreach video focused in closer to highlight specific displays such as the Selection from Collection monthly exhibit series. Selections from Collections is a monthly exhibit series that features the many unique objects in Surrey's Heritage Collection. This girl's Highland dancing outfit comes from the Surrey Heritage Collection. It was a gift of Gloria Bingham. Another way Museum of Surrey presented online content during pandemic shutdown was through virtual exhibit tours. With the help of Fraser Valley Virtual, these tours offered remote access to key galleries and temporary exhibits. The technology is the same used by real estate agencies showcasing houses for sale online. With the sudden closure due to COVID, these virtual tours had a new urgency and importance. For example, the temporary blockbuster exhibit Arctic Voices from Ontario's Science North was open only 6 days before shutdown. The virtual tour offered important virtual access. Another exhibit, Discover Your Story, We Can Help, a collaboration with multiple community partners, was scheduled to open in May. Unsure when the museum might reopen, Museum of Surrey decided to install the exhibit as planned in May and opened it virtually. There you have it, some insights into how Museum of Surrey thought outside the walls and offered virtual content during the COVID-19 shutdown. We hope you will visit the Museum of Surrey webpage and social media pages to explore at your leisure. If you'd like more information, you are welcome to contact Colleen Sharp, that's me, Curator of Exhibits at the Museum of Surrey. Thanks for sharing in this Museum of Surrey story.
Hi there. If you could just bring up the video, that would be great. Hi everyone. My name's Spencer Stewart. I'm the project manager for the BC Museum Portraits Project. I'm broadcasting from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people in Point Grey. And I'm here today to speak briefly about the BC Museum Portraits Project, just outlining some of its the process, its objectives, how it's going to be made accessible to people, its relevancy to the sector and the public, some accomplishments as well as some goals looking into the future. So my background is I work as a collections advisor for private and institutional clients, specifically rare books, manuscripts, prints, and photos. And it's so very much interested in how collections form and how they take shape and how over time societal changes result in the reinterpretation of collections. So that's really the kind of focus that that guided the work that I'm doing with the BC Museum Portraits Project. So I was lucky enough to start partnering up with the BC Museum Association in late 2019, early 2020. And the project basically hinges around site visits to the various museums throughout the province, gathering oral histories as well as photographs of the various museums to develop a repository of the way the collections were started, how they developed, and then on into the future with the change in society and how we interpret and look at objects and new items and how these museums connect with their communities. So this is something that's made accessible initially through the Culture Online systems that were set up in the event of COVID, and with the new redesign that's being set up through the BC Museum Association, there'll be a repository there, a home there. The relevancy of the project, with regards to the sector, speaking with various curators, archivists, museum directors, we're really hoping to sort of develop the relationship that people who work at these various museums and archives, the relationship that they have with these items and ways in which they're trying to connect these with the communities and the histories that make up the area around them. For the public, they really provide a kind of a background look into these collections, how they shaped and how those kind of determine and also provide new opportunities for creating collections that reflect the communities that they live in. Oftentimes when I'm talking to curators or directors of museums, they're always working to focus on exhibitions that are happening in the present, and sometimes conversations about how the collections came to be, also such a massive part of the day, and the care and management of those collections, how that comes to be and how that takes place. Accomplishments so far, since January of 2020, we've been able to have 22 visits, and I will be including in the chat a thing known as dispatches, which will provide you with a list of some of the institutions that have been able to visit with a photographer, and some people may be actually on the call, so hello there. It's good to see you again. And the plan for 2021, obviously things have kind of changed in terms of the outcomes, but the idea is to continue working in and around the Lower Mainland with various museums and archives, going onto the island and doing visits there, conducting site visits there, and then on into the interior, always with a thought to get throughout the whole province. During COVID, I was able to speak with some directors and archivists up in the sort of northern parts of the province, and very much want to keep those contacts going. So I will provide my contact information in the chat, and so please stay in touch, and I'll provide you with updates as things keep going on. You know, funding is ongoing in order to keep the project going, so that really sort of depends on how the project keeps moving. And yeah, so I'm available at any time to speak about the project, and I really look forward to meeting you all in the near future and discussing how the collections came to be in the various communities that you're in, and what are some of the thoughts for the future, and how to reinterpret them and reflect the diversity of history and the diversity of stories that make this province such a rich province. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to the next presentations and the rest of the conference. This is just a fantastic opportunity, so thank you.
Hello. First, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to share our story with you today. I present with deep gratitude for living and working on the beautiful lands of the Lekwungen people, the Songhees, and Esquimalt nations. Next slide, please. And we'll skip over this one too. Thank you. On March 16th, the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria made the hard decision to close its doors. For the following 2 months, staff remained at home and our doors were closed to the public. We partnered with galleries across the country in online programming and continued our regular programming in virtual ways. Upon the announcement of an upcoming Phase 2 in May, we began to plan our reopening. A reopening committee was formed. We had been waiting for this day for some time and were eager to put our plans into action. With a week turnaround, we had to be strategic, collaborative, and put the safety of our visitors, staff, and volunteers above all else. On May 19th, we reopened our doors. Next slide, please. It is something we have all come to know too well: the health screenings, the sanitizing, plexi barriers, and one-way routes. But for dynamic cultural spaces, guidelines and policies are so much more than that. One of our first priorities was accessibility. To welcome visitors back to the gallery, admission was by donation for the first 2 months. This brought in 1,800 new faces that, like many of us, had been isolated and were hungry for arts and culture. Today, we see approximately 700 visitors a month, about a 40% decrease from our average admissions, but a success considering our current circumstances. During this time, we were lucky to have a strong intersectional team leading us through. Decisions were being made across hierarchical lines. We quickly created dynamic guidelines, adapting them to our specific space. Over time, these guidelines have changed, specifically focusing on social distancing versus area limits, introducing contact tracing, increased security and signage, and implementing mandatory masks for staff. Next slide, please. As a recently unionized organization and a growing team, we quickly adapted to formalize our existing Occupational Health and Safety Committee. Now more than ever, inspections, protocol, and guidelines became of utmost importance. Our OH&S committee grew from 2 members to 6, representing more departments and staffing groups. With a people-first focus, feedback from visitors, staff, and volunteers influenced decision-making more than ever. With limited opportunity to gather information from visitors in traditional ways, front of house staff had the added responsibility to encourage visitors for feedback and track that information electronically. Next slide, please. During lockdown, the Visitor Service Department laid off 8 staff members. During closure, this was one of the most difficult parts. Our diverse and engaged team was gone. As a supervisor, it was my priority to check in with laid-off staff and keep them updated on the status of our reopening. Luckily, with an earlier opening date, we were able to recall 4 staff, and then by July had recalled all visitor staff. Scheduling and opening hours had to be reviewed to ensure enough time for cleaning. Additional part-time hours were allocated to ensure regular staff had opportunities to work from home. Many staff still made the decision to remain on leave, which phased in recalls and made it increasingly difficult to have a standard schedule. With phased recall meant increased and adaptive training. With a new normal, new guidelines, and often new visitors, our team was meeting more regularly to keep engaged. The relationship with visitor services and security became increasingly important, and team building became a priority. With increased guidelines came increased need for conflict resolution with visitors. A violence and incident guideline was created specifically for harassment and violence from the public, and all of our staff in visitor services and security attended de-escalation, bystander intervention, and conflict resolution training. Next slide, please. As an organization with over 400 regular volunteers, the closing of our doors displaced many from their community. Volunteers who had spent the last 25 years coming to the gallery on a weekly basis found themselves at home isolated. During closure, it was of utmost importance to reach out to our regular volunteers on a personal basis. Luckily, during lockdown with National Volunteer Appreciation Week, our staff was encouraged to be creative and put in extra effort above and beyond to let our volunteers know how important they were to our organization. We quickly adapted to new virtual opportunities, from reaching out to volunteers for articles for our magazine and creating new research projects. One of our most successful programs was created by Reagan Shrum in our curatorial department, who worked with local artist Libby Oliver to begin the Listener in Residence program. This calling program connected volunteers with seniors living in senior care homes through conversation, cultivating intergenerational connections to help ease loneliness. We have had over 140 volunteers take part, and often had more volunteers than we had seniors to connect them to. Upon reopening, we made the decision to slowly integrate existing regular volunteers once we went into phase 3. With this, we still only have 10 volunteers who join us on site. However, this is less flexible than ever before. Volunteers must be scheduled to ensure safe social distancing and workspace is available. Protocols have been put into place to ensure their safety, and they were asked to sign memorandums of understanding to ensure they understood the possible risks of returning to our public space. We are still limiting volunteers and are planning to accept new volunteers in the next few months. Next slide, please. This experience has taught me just how resilient our small gallery is. Our team is strong, creative, and adaptive. More importantly, our local arts community is. As we enter our new normal, I'm confident that we will continue to quickly adapt and tackle whatever else may be thrown at us. By putting our people first, we have had a safe and successful reopening. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to thank you for your time. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you're interested in learning more about our reopening process, or if you're interested in any of the documents I've discussed. My email and contact info is there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kanchan Lal. I'm the museum coordinator of the POCO Heritage Museum and Archives. Next slide, please. I'd like to recognize and acknowledge that POCO Heritage is located on the unceded core traditional territory of the Coquitlam First Nation and the Coast Salish people. Next slide. So a little bit about our museum and archives. We are a small community-based museum and nonprofit and charity. Next slide. And the way that our museum and archives functions is that we are based with a volunteer-based board, and we have one staff member, which right now is myself. Next slide. So in March 2020, like many of your own cultural sites and heritage institutions, our museum doors shut, and we were left with many similar challenges. However, one of our biggest challenges that we faced as a small community museum is how do we keep up? As we move from this physical to digital world, we encountered problems that we couldn't necessarily do without staff power or the finances or resources. Next slide. So one of the things that we started doing was social media programs. We started asking the public and our community members longer discussion questions online, such as what am I questions and where am I questions. Next slide. And from these types of discussion questions that were asked online, we noticed that by doing so, the community became facilitators for us. That actually chiseled out some time for us to take our programs and move them virtual and move them digital. Next slide. So like many of you, one of the first things that we did was go through the platform Zoom. Please ignore my face in this picture. The reason why I chose it is on the very right-hand side at the bottom. You'll notice some of the tech difficulties that we had, which I'm sure many of you experienced. Next slide, please. We also started doing virtual events. So we turned our evening programs here and events into virtual online. Now these ones featured community members and speakers, which was really fantastic for us because they were able to curate the content, leaving us time to create new programming. And this event here was themed flu, and it was not because of COVID, but it was because our newest exhibit was about 4 events in Port Coquitlam, BC, the first one beginning with the Spanish flu, ironically. Next slide, please. And next slide. So with all that time where community speakers were able to create these content for these new events and people were facilitating their own discussion via social media, we were able to create 2 new online programs for students from K to grade 5 and ESL students. Next slide. One of our most successful programs, however, is Quarantales, which came out about a week after the museum door shut down. Quarantales, of course, is a mix between the word quarantine and tales, and asks community members to submit their artwork, prints, photography, anything that they'd like while they were self-isolating and quarantining. Next slide, please. This actually proved again to be our most successful program because it engaged not only our community members, but our community partners. We were able to collaborate with Success Tri-Cities from Quarantales to offer new webinars to newcomers and new immigrants about how to access museums and how to access our online resources. Next slide. This program, and next slide. This program also ended up engaging some of the school art programs around us, and Quarantales became a final project for some of these art classes. And Lorena, if you don't mind skipping to the very last slide, as we're running out of time, what I'd like you to take away from today's presentation is that community partners and collaborators sometimes can be your education department and your events and marketing team and your resources when you don't have any. And although you're in times of pandemic and need, is not to dismiss them when you're creating your events and programs, because they can create that content for you and they can also help. Okay, thank you very much.
So Vanessa, can you just let me know if you can hear me? I'd like to put external speaker.
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So hello, everybody. Well, I'm just gonna, there we go. Hello, everybody. My name is Liz Crocker. Thank you for having me. My talk today is on COVID lessons. As you can tell from my beautiful illustrations. So I'm a learning program developer at the Royal BC Museum, and I manage the online learning programs at the museum, which includes our learning portal, which is an educational website, and we also have digital field trips. And so when the pandemic hit, online learning expanded, as you well know. And I also, sorry, I forgot, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm doing this from home, and I live in Saanich, BC on Vancouver Island, and I'm on the beautiful territories of the Wasanich speaking people. So, my first lesson, digital can be complex and exhausting. So I already knew it was complex, but with the expansion of everything in online learning at the museum, I found it quite exhausting. Hence my paper presentation to you today. I just needed some time with the paper and the felt pens. Lesson number 2. My understanding of the impact of the pandemic on online learning at my museum is limited and feels woefully unsophisticated, as I've not had a moment to reflect. Really feels like that. Lesson number 3. I actually think that we are on the right track in online learning at the Royal BC Museum. Demand is definitely up. So to give you an example, with the learning portal, our website, educational website, so from between January and mid-March of this year, we had about 4,000 page views, or just over 4,000 page views. And then between March 15th and April 7th, it went up 445% to just over 31,000 page views in that very short period of time. So that's a huge increase for us. It's not at those numbers right now. It's gone back down, but it's still higher than it usually is. So that's super encouraging. And then with our digital field trips, so this is not our live stream events. This is just between us and a classroom or a particular group, just to give you an idea. These have increased as well. So last year, between September 2019 and mid-March, when we shut down, we booked 19 digital field trips and delivered 19. And already, without any promotion, really just word of mouth, we've already booked 23 digital field trips between September and December of this year. And they are steadily trickling in, which they didn't used to do. So 23 is not a huge number, but it's a big increase for us. So, and we are anticipating that's going to continue. And that's not to mention the additional new webinar series that my colleagues Kim Goff and Chris O'Connor talked about in the lightning talks. The three of us have been developing and delivering these live webinar events since April. And so that's another huge addition to the online learning programs at the museum. My fourth lesson from the pandemic is be kind to the digital technology people. I now have a little bit of a window into their world, and I can tell you when you call them up with your issue and they don't respond to it with the emotional response that you feel that your issue deserves, it's because they have been on that digital precipice before and they know they're going to be there again. So just cut them some slack. Be kind to those people. And finally, just turn it off and turn it back on when you're having issues with technology. 9 times out of 10, that will fix your problem. And if it's a Zoom issue, just leave the Zoom room and come back in. That will usually fix it. And that, I'm afraid, is about all I've learned from the pandemic at this point. Thank you very much.
Hi all, we're the St. Jude's Heritage Museum, and we want to thank BCMA for having us here. Part 1. Whatever it takes. Pre-COVID, Corley. Hopeful. Museum opening. Big year. Much energy. Wow. Boom. COVID. Closed. Hopeless. Sad. Working from home. Tours canceled. Life ruined. Suddenly, like a beacon in the dark, inspiration! Chief Sea Dog, in with the video updates. Us, inspired. Closing to the public meant reimagining ways in which we had to engage our community. We didn't want to close and just be closed. We wanted to continue sharing and educating our audience in a way that, one, allowed people to take a moment away from the global pandemic, two, was easily accessible, and three, taught our wider community a thing or two about Seal people. Part 2, making a murderer of the social media game. In the beginning, we made our videos using only script, phone, sock props, unstable dollar store tripod. Since then, we've upgraded and now we use keyboard, external mic, stable tripod, props. So many props. And lots of bad ideas. Some good ones though. It was like upgrading to the premium car wash. So filming during this time was anything but easy. We were on a rotating schedule where there was only 2 of us in the office at any given time, if any. Part of our museum mission statement is that we believe in the power of our own voice to inspire, educate, and transform. And so we took the educational aspect of the museum and transformed the way in which we share it utilizing our own voices. Since we've been open, we pared it back to just 1 video per week. This opened the door to new digital media-based projects in a digital media-based year. The filming videos also gives us the unique opportunity to collaborate with community members as well as other organizations. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Corley. Hi, Victoria. Digital sharing can be as seemingly complex as creating and distributing videos and programming, or as simple as joining other museums through the use of a hashtag such as #CuratorBattle. What up, West Bank? It's your girl. To be honest, we didn't really think these videos could catch on as well as they did, but that told us that there was a need for this kind of content. We started down this road and continued down this road because it's fun for us. As a smaller team of only 4 people, video recording gives us a reason and opportunity to collaborate and work as a team in a time when spirits are not the highest. Despite all the likes and the call-outs, I like to think that we're still just a humble team at the museum. I don't think the fame has really changed us all that much. I only drink the stabbing! All jokes aside, we're really happy that our videos got out there and that they were able to make people smile, and also that we were able to contribute to the BCMA Lightning Talks. Thank you for having us here, and be sure to come visit. Bye!
Hey guys!
Hey, thank you for watching. Sorry, I got a little laggy at the end, but happy to be here. It was super awesome to see everybody else's videos, and yeah, thanks for the invite.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and presenters. I'm so inspired. I imagine that you should all be too. It looks great. I see all the comments that have been coming through from this past hour. So great to be part of such a supportive community. So we just want to thank everyone so much for joining us online for this session, as well as presenting and sharing your stories. We are amazed by the creativity, resilience, and out-of-the-box thinking that everyone has been working on during this pandemic. And we really encourage people to seek out our presenters on social media, connect with them through their emails, stay up to date on their projects. Also, too, we're always looking for content for Roundup magazine, so please feel free to reach out to me as well as the Roundup editor. We hope you'll join us for more of our conference sessions. So we have another one coming up this afternoon, and you can check out all the full details on our conference schedule on the website. And be sure to make sure that you register for our very first virtual BCMA Awards, which will be held tomorrow night. So come on back together so we can celebrate this year's nominees and winners in style with your own custom alcoholic or non-alcoholic cocktail, which is also available on the BCMA website. So thank you so much, everyone, once again, and we look forward to seeing you again with more of our events with this conference. Take care.